Alright, so today I'm going to talk about how storytelling turns content into clients. It's going to be an in-depth breakdown. It's basically how I've taken my videos and my posts and converted views and impressions into leads and clients. And again, I'm going to go through actual examples. So you can see here at the bottom, I have a carousel that I'm going to break down in detail. I'm going to also walk you through how some of the same storytelling elements have worked for some of my videos. Yeah, so I'm going to get into real examples. But before that, a few housekeeping items just to show you my credibility and also giving you context about my current situation. I was able to use the same method to hit $24,000 in 26 days. If you haven't seen the video where I break down my content ecosystem, I would highly recommend checking it out. At the end of this video, I will leave a link to that video so you can go check out how I was able to hit this goal. And by the end of the month, I actually almost hit $30,000. I didn't hit 30. But yeah, the goal was to hit 32. I fell short of that by a few thousand, but nevertheless, that was a really good month. And that was my peak. That was my best month to this date. Yeah, if you want to check out the breakdown at the end of this video, you should. But I should call out that it's the same storytelling pattern that I used for my posts and my videos back then. And that's what's actually gotten me to hit this goal. And also just to show you that I don't have a massive following on any of my platforms that I use. For instance, on Instagram, I have a little over 5,200 followers at the moment. And on LinkedIn, I have about 9,000 followers. And on YouTube, a little over 1,000 subscribers. But I should call out that on Instagram and LinkedIn, most of my following came from my podcasting days. So back when I used to run a podcast, which was powered by Sennheiser, by the way, I got like a lot of people following me because some of my videos did really well. And so I'd say about 90 to 95% of my following here have all come from my podcasting days, which means that only about a few hundred followers are ones that have engaged and found me in the last few months. All the more reason for you to believe that you don't need a massive following to do what I'm talking about. It's just a matter of how you position yourself online, use good storytelling techniques to bring someone along on a journey, and then you give them something in return, and in that return or that exchange, you actually make money. Let's actually get into how I've structured things, right? So I use Instagram and even LinkedIn in some cases to be my attention platform. And so I use good storytelling on these short form videos and even my carousels and posts to convey a certain emotion, convey a certain outcome, convey what I've gone through stories, and through that, I optimize my content for a particular outcome. And so in my case, I optimize heavily for engagement. And so you'll see here, these are two videos that did fairly well, and both of them got an average of about 60 comments or so. And from there, once I do get them to comment on the post, what I do is I have ManyChat, or I even manually, kind of take over in some cases. I've got a team member who helps out too. And we basically nurture them in the DMs, but more importantly, send them onto YouTube. Like for instance, a video like this, where they get an idea of our credibility and the way we operate. And that becomes our backbone of my content ecosystem, if you will. So the nurture happens primarily on either DMs or on my YouTube channel. But the catch though is it's very easy for me to say this after the fact, and a lot of people try their best to optimize their content with ManyChat and whatnot, but at the core of it, it's all just storytelling. If your content doesn't evoke an emotion or get someone thinking, then it's pointless. Because I'm sure you've seen every Tom, Dick and Harry is now creating content. Which means that the only way you stand out is by you talking about your personal experiences, but packaged in the right way, or you talk about a novel insight or something you've learned, again, packaged in a really good way. And so it's the same storytelling framework that's used by movies, TV shows, and some of the best content creators on earth, which I've been able to study, and that's actually helped me get the kind of leads or clients that I mentioned earlier. I should also call out that this is the same pattern I use for some of my LinkedIn posts too, which actually went viral. But I'm constantly trying to not go viral, in the sense, if my content caters to a lot of people, chances are I would get almost no leads from them. I would get maybe like high level attention. For instance, both of these posts, and I wanted to include them for the same reason, I got 0 leads. I got absolutely no leads from both of these, which is insane. This is not how most people see virality and see impressions. I got about 500,000 impressions on one of my posts. And the other one, I got about 350,000 views or impressions, which is insane. But I got 0 leads. The point I want to make is that a video like this that didn't do all that well, maybe like a few thousand views, but got quite a bit of engagement, and out of this, I actually had a few clients that converted. It's just insane. And so how do you do that? You actually do that through really, really good storytelling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through an example of a carousel and how you need to structure your content in a way that you kind of build intrigue, you shed light on a problem, then you provide a solution, then talk about what your solution is, and then you have a CTA. Now, I just touched on it at a very high level, but let's actually talk about what we are trying to do here. So there's something in the marketing and the content space called I forget what it's conventionally called. I think it's called the awareness something. I forget what it's called. But the point is, you want to take someone from being completely unaware to being aware of you, your solution, whether there's even a solution for the problem that they're facing, and try to shed as much light as you possibly can. So if you were to look at this particular timeline, or this gradient, if you will, you could find someone who probably might lie somewhere here where they don't have any idea about the problem at hand. So let's say, for instance, we go back to that example I mentioned about you don't need to go viral. So a lot of people don't even understand that that's actually a problem. Going viral is actually going to be a problem. So a lot of people would actually fall in this space where they're not too aware of the problem. And then there's someone like us who might have understood that, and so you might be a little more further along and think, okay, I understand the problem, but I don't know what's the solution to that problem. And that's where you kind of get into the solution space where you're like, okay, maybe I do know that there could be a solution, but I'm not sure which solution works. So the more you kind of go through this gradient, you realize, and again, coming down to how much time you spend in understanding the topic, you would kind of go through the gradient, and eventually that person would get a fair understanding. Oh, okay, so for this problem, there are many solutions that exist, and I'm well aware that there are many solutions. The part that gets really interesting is when you actually take it from just a solution to talking about your solution. I should say that that particular piece about having your own solution is what's going to set you apart. For instance, the way I operate is I'm very much for trust-based marketing and having a content ecosystem. I go on and on and on about how you need a YouTube channel because that's the one that's going to do the heavy lifting for your content and for your nurture system. And so in my case, I'm trying my best to get them to understand what my solution is. And so like I said, you could have a ton of solutions, but what you need to do is take them from that bit to being aware of our solution and being sold. And so if you think about it, you're basically going from, or you're taking your customer or your audience from not being aware of a problem to then being aware of the problem. And then from there, once they're aware of the problem, taking them to the solutions. And then from the solutions, you're kind of taking them to your solution. This is very, very important to understand because you're then taking them across the whole unawareness, or I don't know if that's the right word, but taking them from being unaware to the aware part of your solution and even the problem solution gradient. So that's important because even if you zoom out and look at how I've structured this particular carousel, you'll see it's the same thing. It's basically first having a problem, then talking about what is the potential solution, and then talking about what our solution is, and then having a CTA. Now, if you're looking at this and you're thinking that anyone can just use ChatGPT and come up with a bunch of problems, pick one of the topics there and come up with different solutions for that, and then come up with their own solution for that, and then finally provide CTA, you're right, you could do that. But that's where you are no different from the other slop that you see outside. So what you need to do, and the part that some of the best creators on earth and even some of the best directors when it comes to movies and TV shows do, is how you can kind of go through the ebb and flow of storytelling. And so you do that by first building intrigue with a hook. I would say that about 60% of the effort that you need to spend on your storytelling needs to be on the hook. Once you're kind of able to build intrigue, you're able to build some sort of curiosity, it becomes so much easier for you to take them along on the storytelling journey because that's just how humans work. They're constantly looking for answers. And so if you're able to kind of bridge the gap between where they're at and that curiosity that they have by delivering a solution that's worth their time, then you would get them to engage with the post or engage with the video, and then that's where the goal lies, because then you can then take them along on the nurture journey, like I mentioned earlier. This is very important to understand, because if you don't focus on that intrigue piece, like about 60 to 70% of your effort has to be on the hook. So you have to think about how you can structure it in a way that you build intrigue. Now let's actually go through what this post is about. So I start off by saying short form content is overrated. You need to do this instead and learn what actually converts followers into clients. And so you'll see there's a photo of me. There's also an image that I generated using AI. And so this basically builds intrigue, because a lot of people think that short form content is the way that they can build their coaching or consulting or agencies, basically any online service-based business. And so for my ICP, this is almost going against the grain, doing something or talking about a topic that not a lot of people agree with. So that actually builds enough intrigue. And I also follow it up with a rehook where I say you need to do this instead and learn what actually converts followers into clients. So then there's enough reason for them to stick around and actually see what is the other way to do things if short form content is overrated. From there, I actually get into some proof and talk about how I hit my my monthly goal within 26 days in my coaching and consulting business, with about 5,200 Instagram followers, about 1,000 YouTube subscribers, and 0 viral moments. Here's exactly how. So even with this video, if you remember what I did, it's the same storytelling piece, right? I spoke about what the topic is and what you can expect. And then I went through the payment proofs and then actually went through my social following to give you context. It's the same thing here. You could actually use the proof at the end if you need, but where the proof fits in doesn't necessarily matter. But for creators or entrepreneurs who don't have a massive following, people are constantly, skeptical. So what you can do is front load your proof, so that way there's some credibility and there's more reason for them to actually stick around and see whether it's worth their time. I first shed light on what the actual problem is, because I say that short form content is overrated, but why is it overrated? And so that's the part that the problem piece explains really well. It explains the why. This is super important. I cannot stress on the importance of having to explain the why. What people end up doing is they jump directly into hacks or tips or steps. All of that's great, and to be fair, that's something that AI can do really well today. But the part that people completely ignore, or creators or entrepreneurs completely ignore, is the whole piece about evoking emotion in your audience. And you do that by talking about the why, not the what or the how. You talk about the why. And so in this case, I say I stopped posting value-based reels because a hot take in 8 words that teaches them nothing does absolutely nothing for the person. And that's what most people do. And then I say your followers' thumbs are exhausted from scrolling, so give them a break and some actual value. This part is not even needed, but I just thought I'll add sort of a comedic flair to the post. And so I said, ain't nobody handing over their car to a stranger with a meme. I don't even know which character this is. Anyway, from there I talk about what has actually changed, like the old way versus the new way. And so I say that in the old days, short form content got you clients because the market wasn't saturated. But now everyone's posting every single day. People don't want more content. They need reasons to trust you. Earlier, short form content could have gotten you clients and you could have nurtured and converted them directly on Instagram. But if you're working in the high ticket segment especially, it's a lot more challenging because everyone's doing the same thing. And so just going through this arc itself, you'll see why I stopped posting value-based reels, why you shouldn't be posting just hacks and tips like I mentioned earlier, and no one's going to hand over their money to a random stranger just because they watched like a 45-second reel, and then also talking about what's actually changed in the near past. So that way it sheds light on what the problem is. And then we talk about the solution. But I should say that there is a bridge between the problem and the solution here. And so here I say short form makes it hard for anyone to trust you because we scroll past it before it's even done. But the content that actually converts, so the solution actually starts from here. I call it deep trust content, which tackles a real pain point with real depth. And I say, and we do that using long form YouTube content. Like one video does what 100 reels can't. It's the same thing that Seth Godin talks about, where a long form video isn't just 2 times or 3 times or 10 times more effective than a short form video. It's actually 100 or 1,000 times more effective, which is true. And it builds also on the 7 hours of trust that Google says you need before someone buys. Short form content can't do that. Even if it does, it's super hard for high ticket offers and takes forever. So you'll see, I kind of went from shedding light on the problem to then teeing it up with more of why the problem doesn't work or why the problem is a big problem, and then jumped into the actual solution. And so this part explains the what or the how instead. And so you'll see this is one part of the solution. Like, yes, like we all know long form content is great. Like the kind of retention that you get with long form content has far more depth than something like what Instagram or TikTok can do. So we know that. And so the part that I focus on from here is our solution and what I believe, which basically explains how we do things with our IP. And so in my case, I say strategically build a content ecosystem that uses short form to attract and long form content to nurture. And so you take a stranger to an audience member, to a lead, to a prospect and a paying customer by going through the content ecosystem. That way you take someone, like I mentioned here, from stranger to a paying customer who actually trusts you in the process as long as they've consumed enough of your long form content. So that becomes our solution. And so once that makes sense to them, they're like, they're probably wondering what can they do or how can they replicate this in their own content. And so I say, you want the full content ecosystem, then come in depth, and I'll send you the exact roadmap to attract clients who already trust you. And so that becomes the CTA and how you can do it too, or how the audience member can do it too. So that's basically the flow. And so if you'll see, if I go back to that gradient I mentioned, we're taking them from the unaware section to the aware section, from not knowing about the problem to knowing more about the solution to knowing what our solution is about. Now, I should say that there could be instances where a customer or an audience member could already be aware of the fact that they know there's a problem. Like the short form content alone is not going to cut it. So they're well aware of that, which is actually good for us. So they actually would, stick around up until the part where they see what the solution is about. And then there could also be people who also know that the solution is long form content. And so they might stick around till around the solution bit and then see what our solution is and how we're different. And then if someone's already aware of our solution, chances of them converting or buying from us is much, much higher. And so, so that's basically how you structure your content in a way that it goes from building intrigue to maybe even showing proof. You can actually show this proof piece right in the middle here as well, or at the end right before the CTA. It doesn't really matter. But like I said, if you're a smaller channel or a smaller creator, the earlier the better. And then you kind of shed light on the problem, go into a solution, talk about our solution, and then the CTA. Now, if I were to really get technical here, there's one part that a lot of people mess up. And again, I'm not going to get into a storytelling framework today, but if we were to break this up, and if you were to ask me how would you be able to actually come up with a solid hook, there's actually a small hack and something you can do to ensure that the hook is pretty compelling. And what that is, let me actually just copy this down. Like I said, I can move the proof all the way to here, somewhere in the middle here, and it's not going to make a difference. But for now, I'm just going to move the proof out of the way. Also, I'm going to remove this because this part about the joke, not necessary in this post, to be honest, but it adds a nice flair. It adds my vibe, or, the kind of humor that I might bring to the table. Now, if we were to go into the hook, you'll see that it says short form content is overrated and you need to do this instead. And this is what actually converts followers to clients. This is literally the question that you would ask or the statement you would make right before you give the solution, if you think about it. Which means if I were to move this around and I move the problem part here and I bring the hook right here and you actually read how these posts play out, you'll see. So I stopped posting value-based reels. In the old days versus the now situation, it's like everyone's posting now, so they need reasons to trust you. This part, like I said, is a tee up of the problem. So it says short form makes it hard for anyone to trust you because we scroll past it before it's even done. And then before we get into the actual solution, if you think about it, we are basically saying, you know what, short form content is overrated. And so what you can do instead is the content that actually converts is deep trust content. So the part I want you to stress on is how you come up with the actual hook. Because like I said, about 60 to 70% of your time needs to go into this hook. Because if the person doesn't even stop scrolling or doesn't go past the first slide in this case, Or in the case of a video, and again, I should call out, it doesn't matter whether it's a carousel, a post, a reel, even a long form YouTube video, it's the same thing. If they don't get past your hook after the part you've built intrigue, there's a very high chance that they won't watch the whole thing or consume the whole thing. It's the same thing here. We need our first slide of a carousel or the first 2 lines of a written post or a caption or the description in a photo post on Instagram, or the first 2 lines, which is about 3 to 5 seconds on short form reel. So like the example I showed you earlier, even for, like videos like this, the title is one part of the hook, but along with that, what I'm saying is also another part of the hook. So that needs to be solid if you want people to stick around and actually engage with your posts. And yeah, it's the same thing with YouTube videos as well. The first 15 seconds is crucial. So coming back to this example, you'll see that this is pretty compelling and this ties right here. And that's crucial. Because this, if you think about it, is building intrigue, and then we kind of have a couple of slides that really are shedding light on what the problem is, my proof and whatnot. And so you don't just want to give away the solution. What you want to do is explain the why first, like I said. But no one's going to just listen to the why unless you give them a reason to stick around. And so you do that by basically building intrigue in the hook. And I would say once you come up with this flow, once you come up with what the narrative is like, where you know what the problem is, how are you explaining the why, then you go into the solution and explain what and the hows of the solution, and then you talk about what your solution is, then you can think through how you can come up with a solid hook that ties into this part of the story. This is crucial. I can't stress on this enough. This is where most people get it wrong. And then now I've gotten to a point where I kind of think in terms of hooks for the most bit. Like anytime I come up with a post or the video, I'm constantly thinking about what is the hook that's going to get people intrigued. It's the same thing when it comes to long form video as well. I'm constantly thinking about what the title needs to be, what the thumbnail needs to be, what the first 15 seconds of the video needs to be. And in this case, a carousel, what are the words or the copy that I can use on the hook that'll get people intrigued. And those LinkedIn posts I mentioned as well, it's because the first 2 lines of my LinkedIn posts were super compelling and kind of encapsulated what you can expect in the entire post and led into the solution. But before I got into the solution, I actually had to explain the why, which actually got them further intrigued, or I would say where I evoked an emotion, and from there I provided the solution and our solution. So yeah, so this is what I wanted to stress on today. This is the same flow that you can follow for any content piece. Like a good carousel is a good email, is a good newsletter, is a good reel. It's all the same thing. It doesn't matter. It just comes down to how you're able to weave your storytelling in a way you go through those ebb and flows. So you start by building intrigue, you deliver a little bit of value and explain the why, then you kind of pull it back, talk about the solution, and then go into what your specific solution is, and then a CTA, and you're golden. So yeah, this is just one bit of it. I would say there's a whole lot more that I haven't spoken about in this video, and this is where we can get into maybe the storytelling framework. This is actually something I was walking one of my clients through a while ago. So I thought instead of just, leaving this whiteboard as is, I thought I might as well actually break it down on a video so that others, can also benefit from it. So yeah, there's a lot more in the storytelling framework, but I'm not going to go through those examples right now. I just hope that this entire flow made sense. And actually, if you need me to go into the storytelling framework, then let me know down in the comments and I can create a separate video where I go through this framework and break it down. So I have a few topics here that my clients and my team members were talking about. We actually went through the whys and kind of really shed light on the storytelling piece. If this is something that intrigues you, let me know down in the comments, and yeah, I'll create a separate video. Like, storytelling is one of the oldest traits in the world. Thousands of years ago, people used to explain stories using, even before the alphabet was discovered, people used to basically illustrate with images. Even in, back in caveman times, you'd see it within caves too. And so it's the same thing that is at the root of evoking any emotion online. The better you're a storyteller, the more you can get the outcome that you want from content. Yeah, anyway, I hope this was helpful. And as promised, here's a video where I talk about how I hit 24K in 26 days. It's a full breakdown of my content ecosystem. And if you're curious to know more about how you can structure your Instagram page in a way that your pinned posts are optimized for lead nurture and lead attraction, then you can check out this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.